This section will give a brief look into Frozen and examine what it is that makes it so different. It is worth noting that no, Frozen is not the first Disney movie with a strong sisterly bond, nor the first where the girl needs a guy to save her, nor the first where marriage is questioned, nor the first with a queen. But there is something about it that makes this film unique. What makes it different is that Disney is being overtly self-reflexive and challenging its own dominant tropes. This overt self-reflexivity also invites the audience to be more active and conscious participants in their engagement with the film. The following video by the PBS ID channel perfectly summarizes this idea.
Frozen is a fairy tale that critiques fairy tales. A couple weeks ago here in New York, we suffered a pretty awful heat/humidity wave, and so for obvious reasons, and with my AC cranked to Arctic blast, I decided to rewatch Frozen. And I started thinking that, as late as Idea Channel would be to this dance, we really should say something about this movie. But what? So much has already been said. I even asked Twitter what there was left to talk about, and the response was basically unanimous. Let it go, let it go, turn away and slam that door. This is really not in my range. Which, yeah, is true. The number of Thinky blog posts written about Frozen is well beyond the ships launched by Helen of Troy range. Frozen has inspired no shortage of critical response. People asking if it's feminist or misogynist, if it challenges the notion of what true love really is, if it illustrates the ways we tend to treat people who suffer from things that are invisible, things like anxiety or depression. People have written about the nature of the Norwegian imagery and dress, asking if it is a celebration or appropriation of the culture of the Sami, the indigenous people of Scandinavia. Link, doobly-doo. And of course, people have asked if Disney is trying to indoctrinate all the children into the radical gay agenda. Frozen launched all of these think pieces not because of its beauty, or not only because of its beauty, but because of its complexity. Frozen is, in essence, something of a fairy tale about fairy tales, or at the very least, a fairy tale that critiques fairy tales through its use of the usual fairy tale tropes. It is based on an honest-to-goodness tale of the fairies, Hans Christian Andersen's Snow Queen, but over the course of something like 15 years in production purgatory, all of the pieces comprising the original story were rearranged like the memories of the sister that you accidentally hurt with your cryokinetic magic. Elsa, originally the evil Snow Queen, was made good. Anna, her sister, was added, and the main character became the person affected by the inciting incident, not the one who caused it. Hans, the Prince Charming character, became the bad guy, and the bad guy, the Duke of Wesselton, became some vaguely xenophobic source of comedic relief.
Wesselton! It's Wesselton!
Sven, I think, was always a thing. And I mean, it's a Disney movie, so you have to have some animal that's not a dog but behaves like one anyway, right? Meaning, Frozen has all of the fairy tale parts, they're just in different places. There's a love interest, but it's not who you think, and there is a dastardly force, but whoops, just kidding, it's over here. There's evil magic, but one of the good characters wields it, and there's true love, but it is between sisters. I see this as an implicit critique of what can count as a fairy tale. Frozen is a vaguely progressive example of how traditional, fantastical type stories can be told while still maintaining their meaning and intended effect on a modern audience.
Look, I'm retired.
We're always gonna feel the need for strongly moral stories, but morality changes over time. The pace may seem glacial, but ever since the start of the so-called Disney Renaissance with The Little Mermaid, there's been no shortage of these types of stories with modern twists, the most present of which is the non-traditional family structure. But none of those stories, I don't think, take the genre as head-on as Frozen does. The upshot being, Frozen is easy to approach critically because it is itself a piece of criticism. The story is simple and familiar, but the details are novel to the point of being innovative. The same thing can be said, I think, about The Fault in Our Stars and Firefly/Serenity, which, along with Frozen, I think it's important to point out, didn't really get real votes of confidence from the Duke of Weaseltowns of the world.
Wesselton! Duke of Wesselton.
Frozen, for example, was significantly under-merchandised at its release because so many people thought it would flop. Turns out that they had snow for brains. Anyway, there's a school of critical thought that says it is only through critique that a finished work is realized. The experience of the audience, of the fans and all that stuff is very important. It activates a work's soul. But, as Terence Hawkes writes in Structuralism and Semiotics, the critic creates the finished work by his reading of it, and does not remain simply an inert consumer of a ready-made product. Thus, the critic need not humbly efface himself before the work and submit to its demands. On the contrary, he actively constructs its meaning. Amongst other things, this means the work isn't some monolith of intention. Its meaning, purpose, and legacy is determined by its effect on its audience, but also how it's shown to fit into the larger cultural situation, both past and present, and how it functions as a work. Hawks was writing specifically about literature, but I think it applies to what we're talking about as well. In some sense, Frozen wasn't realized until it was pulled apart by every Anna, Kristoff, and Olaf under the sun. But in another sense, we might also claim that the fairy tale as a genre is not realized until it becomes the object of criticism. So here we are, fans critiquing Frozen, itself a critique of well-worn, nearly culturally ingrained types of stories, which does so as a well-worn, nearly culturally ingrained type of story. If criticism means that something has been realized, has reached its full potential, and with Frozen, we've reached a kind of recursive meta-criticism, hand motions, maybe then fairy tales, not a particular individual fairy tale, but the genre of fairy tales has been realized in some way. Which is not to say that Frozen is the first thing to ever turn the fairy tale on its head. It's certainly not. There have been things like Wicked, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, Coraline, TV shows like Grimm, and even Supernatural, arguably. I'm also not saying that fairy tales are over in the grand sense, like in the way that I refuse to throw away my chain wallet, even though chain wallets are over. Unless you're a biker, in which case, you look great. Rather, it seems meaningful that Disney, generally regarded as the pop culture purveyor extraordinaire of soft-focused, traditional, hyper-normative, capital F, fairy, capital T, tales, haircut, has culminated a long journey referred to as its renaissance with a movie like Frozen, not necessarily the cause of a massive change in the fairy tale genre, but maybe the result of one. It is a fairy tale which seems, in my estimation at least, to gather up all of the fairy tale tropes, only to just, I'm sure you see where I'm going with this, let them free. Lets them free.
So the main things to think about in regards to this video are what is it about Frozen that makes it stand out from other Disney princess movies? And why should we care, or why is it important that Disney is doing something different? The next section will move into Disney and queer theory.